Any discussion?
No, I move we accept them.
Okay, so second. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you, Janet.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can't compliment.
And next,
Do that duty.
next on the agenda, I had my agenda up, and now I can't see it. Does someone have the agenda in front of them?
We do. Yes, the next on the agenda, Dan, is the update on the comprehensive plan status. So there is, similar to the last time, there's not much to report. Our status remains unchanged, on the state site, as do many other communities. So
Okay.
there's not been much movement there. And there's, at this stage, there's not a lot that we can do except be patient and, keep moving on as we've discussed before. But
Okay.
yeah, so, as we've talked before, if there were any amendments that would need to be done to the plan at this point, it would be something that would have to be drafted for a November vote.
Right. Okay.
So,
Which would give us to like August or something to get something written, submitted, or maybe even July.
Yes, I would say
Okay.
it's pretty quick. It's pretty quick after July. There's
Yeah.
only about there's about a month maybe at best before we start hitting the deadlines for November warrants. So I typically don't think of November as a start writing it in July type
Right.
thing. It's usually more along the lines of if there's something that starts to come up essentially between now and July, we start thinking about
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll hear from the state within the next 2 months to give us a little bit of time in case there is a concern.
Yep.
Okay. I think next on the agenda was the letter that was prepared.
Yeah, I'll let Michelle speak to that one.
Sure, yeah, thank you. So there were minor revisions that we did, to which Warner had spoken about at the last meeting. Just a little bit of a direct request that the specified board, committee, or department provides an update for annual reporting in regard to the goals and strategies as part of the comp plan. So that was really only a minor revision that we done. Otherwise, the majority of the letter had stayed the same.
Okay. Any questions from the members?
Sorry, when are these going out?
We can start on it, relatively soon.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
And the idea was to attach the specific board's goals and strategies?
That's correct. Yeah, that's the idea. Is
Yeah.
that they would, each group would get a list of their, specific goals and strategies.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm fine with the way it's written.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah,
Great.
it looks fine.
So,
Thank you.
yeah. So thank you for putting that together.
All right. Then here's the fun part.
Okay.
So what we'll do just for this evening is I'm going to let Michelle go over the map and the data that we've prepared. I'll just start us off with a little bit of a review, as to what we do and and why we do it. So the land use ordinance, asks for a periodic review, of the growth management permit piece of the land use ordinance. It says that we're to do it periodically, but not less frequently than once every 2 years, to ensure that the annual maximum growth rate has not become inconsistent with the town's capital improvement capabilities to establish or enlarge needed public facilities and services. Based upon a review, growth planning may recommend amending the section as provided for in the section of ordinance that outlines how to modify the ordinance. So, so what we've prepared is a map that shows where things are laid out, and then some graphs and some data. So, Michelle, if you want to go ahead and share those, go for it.
Alrighty, I think I put it up on the screen. Can you see it? Okay, great.
Yes.
Awesome. So this is a quick GIS map that we put together based on the past decade of growth permits. So this goes from December 31st of 2012 until December 31st of 2022. So this is just a little bit of a visual look as to where they're located. Again, we put together some statistics and data points on this as well, but this is just to give you a little bit of a visual representation and comparable to the growth, rural, and transition areas. I don't really have much else to say about it if you have anything to add.
Yeah, so keep in mind, you'll see, some colors kind of pop out larger than others, and really what you're looking at here is, you're looking at an outline of the parcel polygon, and so each one of those polygons really just represents, one data point, so one or at most two growth permits if it were for a duplex. So just to clarify, whenever you see, for example, you see some of these larger, you see a larger red or pink polygon there, that really just represents that parcel boundary. So that gives you just a sense of, a bit of the distribution of those, from a map perspective. And then I think what we'll see in the table, may help us understand a little bit more about how things are going.
Okay.
Okay. But this quick question, are there any of these colored parcels where there was more than one permit for it?
Oh, you
In
mean?
other words, it might have been large enough to put 2 or 3 homes on it and be within the
Oh, that's
land use ordinance.
That's a good question. No, so none of these represent, multiple like single-family structures that were built upon. So
Okay.
the only exception that we have, and just because of the scale of the map, it's difficult to see, but was where we had duplexes, a couple of duplexes done for the Heritage Housing Trust.
Okay.
Awesome. So I'll move on to the statistics and data. Put this all the way up. So at the top there, that's an actual breakdown of the permits that had been issued over the past decade. Again, the same time range there. And then they've been broken out into subgroups, so you can see the breakdown of growth, transition, and rural, as well as a total and then a function of the full 10 years. We did want to draw attention to that 1 year that there were 41 permits issued. One of those was exempt due to the affordable housing piece in the ordinance. So that's just a little bit of breakdown of the numbers. And then from there, utilizing that and calculating the mean, obviously subtracting out the permit that was allocated for the affordable housing brought us to, 21 if it were calculated in the standard that's actually in the ordinance itself. But of course, there are the minimum 40 permits to be issued. And then I put in a little bit of visual rendering as well. So just a little bit of a look at how kind of a trend is going on between like growth, transition, and rural, making up parts of the whole permits that are issued. Here's another little breakdown, if there is any interest, which shows the total permits as well as, breaking it out into the 3 areas. And then lastly, growth areas as a % of total town area, so you can get a look at that too, how rural makes up more than half of that, with transition and growth following. And quick little pie graph.
So one of the questions that I think we ask, and that where this type of information is good for us to look at is, whenever we designated, growth, transition, and rural, really the intent was to direct more growth into the growth area as opposed to your rural area. And, I think, with the data that we're looking at here, we can see that, whether it's a result of, the ordinance is difficult to say, but we can see that's been the trend, where, not only just based on the numbers, but also just based on land area, we can see where there's more activity in the growth area as opposed to rural and transition.
Right. If I remember correctly, the breakdown would be of the 40, that'd be 20 to growth, 12 to transition, and 8 to rural, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So we have been tapping out on rural. Pretty
Correct.
consistent, huh?
That's right, yep. Yeah, that's fairly consistent that number taps out.
Mm-hmm. And at least the last, like 2019 through 2021, we were pretty close on the transition as well, within 80%.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. And then only really once, then 2016, I guess we were pretty close to growth. But I mean, like you said, overall, if you look at the numbers, 104 growth is certainly the highest level. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see, 2021, really is a standout year, and I think, this is one of these that, for those who follow, who followed, the market and development, this is not a surprise, that this is what, that this is what happened, that we tapped out of our, out of our growth permits. And I think it's also not that big of a surprise in terms of the numbers that we saw in 22. Certainly we saw real estate trends, change, dramatically. 2022 was really the year for, higher interest rates, supply chain issues, building costs, all of those elements really came, together to, give us one of the lowest years, that we've had, in the past,
Right.
in the past decade, as far as new construction starts go.
Yeah. Any feeling on how many of those in 2022 were actually holdovers from 2021 because there just was no permit available?
That's a good question. I don't believe we had a waiting list. I think that
Okay.
was, this was one of those that we just, we tapped right out at the end of the year.
Okay.
And I don't believe we had any, that we had any carryovers, from 21.
Okay.
But you can see, that minimum allowable, that bottom, seat that we have, that 40, is an important number. Again, if we had done it just based on that 110%, of the past 10 years, you can see where we'd be at. We'd be at that.
Right.
We'd be at 21.
Right. No, I think seems like it's functioning as designed, I guess.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean, I'm actually, based on this, I'm happy that it's spread out. Doesn't seem to be clustered per se, it's not solely in certain locations that it seems to be a drastic issue, so.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think, based on what we're seeing here, I mean, it's, it's having the, it's directing it, the way that, the ordinance anticipated. Now, I will say, and this is I think a bit of a bigger discussion, is that what does the effect of LD 2003, have on this, in the future? That's, where, now, I think our cap, remains, from what I've seen, any caps that are in place are not affected by LD 2003. And so arguably these numbers wouldn't necessarily change, even though the densities may. So you may have a different density within the growth areas, for that. But this number would not necessarily change. The numbers that we have for affordable, now that that could be affected if I read over it today, and essentially as the language is written, it's a 10% allocation out of the 40 can be used for affordable, and those don't necessarily count towards the cap. So what that means is that so you see we had 41 here, but if we had had a waiting list, that number could have gone up to, we could have had 44 there, where 4 would have been, would have been the ones recognized as, as affordable. So that's why I say we didn't have a, we didn't have a wait list, but.
Okay. So technically our cap is 44, assuming that you have 4 affordable.
Right.
Affordable, correct.
Yeah, a minimum of 4.
Right. Now, LD 2003 could affect, how a development, could come in, could come into play if, you've got some of that language that talks about it, affordable being able to have it 2.5 times the density. You could have a conflict there, where, that type of, development would, could take the 4, but then also could, arguably take additional ones from that. So, again, not that that's, one, not saying that's good or that's bad, that's just, there would be 4 that would be allocated towards affordable, and then the others would, have to compete, along with the rest.
Okay.
So
looking at it from a different perspective, if all 40 growth permits had been issued and someone came forward with an affordable housing opportunity, they could get 4 additional permits.
Correct. Yep.
But the others would have to wait unless there was some.
Correct.
Per our requirement. Okay.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, there would have been 4 that would have been just allocated towards affordable based on the current formula.
Okay.
So, Werner, they would be eligible for that regardless of where they came and the timing and the filing during the course of a year?
Yes, I believe, that's the case. I'd have to, the language is a little bit, complex, but yes, I believe that's the case. They would be eligible. I mean, we count them as growth just for our for tracking purposes. Here, they show up here. But if we had hit 40, right, and we had affordable ones that calculated into that mix, we would have then been able to, recognize up to 4 of those as affordable, and would have been able to, essentially make space for for the market ones.
Okay. So if we, like in the rural area, if we had issued 8 and someone came forward with a plan for affordable housing in the rural area that had another, say 6, we could say we would have to do the 4, or would we be able to say that, no, we've hit our rural max, you can't do anymore? I mean, how does that play into that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And so that section of ordinance that talks about the ones that are available for affordable housing, it does not differentiate between the areas.
Okay.
So does that mean we have the liberty to choose you know, we're gonna honor the 4, but we can still choose to do things the way we want. To, you know, try to maintain a consistency here.
Well, so, no, what it is, I think, you know, the question that Dan was asking is, you know, what if you had a development that, you know, that was affordable that showed up in a rural area, you know, but say you would hit the cap of 8,
Right.
you know? So that 4 doesn't necessarily, so, let me just pull up the language again before I. Yeah, so it doesn't differentiate the zone, you know, so I think arguably that could be in any one of those areas.
So we would be required to issue 4 permits to represent the 10% of the total permits allowed.
That's right, yeah, it doesn't specify that those 4 would have to be in
You-
growth, you know, doesn't differentiate that.
Right. What I meant is will they honor our ability to maintain a consistency here? Maybe this is where Paul should come in as an attorney and maybe.
I don't know, who's they?
Like, the state's saying, you gotta allow 4, right? And they don't differentiate what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, if we say like, yeah, we're trying to maintain a consistency here and we have already capped out at 8, sorry, we can't, you know, you can do this, but you just can't do it in this area.
Yeah, so
mean?
the language, you know, so the language for LD 2003 isn't that, you know, it's not that granular, you know, down to you can do it here, but you can't do it there, you know.
Right, that's
type
what I
situation.
meant by that is, will they honor our consistency of what we're trying to accomplish here, even though we're intending to do the 4, we just can't, you know what I mean? If
Well-
somebody comes along and the growth says I can do it and we still have 4, then great, you can do it. You know, if we haven't met that cap.
Yeah, again, and there, you know, so the state wouldn't necessarily, you know, say one way or the other
Yeah.
on that. But if the statute, so let's say, for example, you have a state statute that says any housing that's designated as affordable is exempt from a growth cap, regardless. Boom, done. So if that's in statute, if that were in statute and that was a shall language, you know, then town can't overrule that. You know, at that point in time, you know, towns would have to bring their ordinance into compliance with that, you know, with that as a state law. And if a town didn't honor that, or didn't, you know, bring their ordinance into effect, they could be subject to a lawsuit.
Right. Which means what we're trying to accomplish here is just kind of get abandoned. It's not gonna necessarily.
No, I mean, not.
Possibly.
You know, I mean, that's, I mean, I'm only talking about, you know.
What
the
ifs.
Very specific
Yes, what
scenario
ifs.
of
Yeah,
affordable, you know.
yeah.
Which, you know, I mean, but you'd have to have that as specific language that would say, you know,
Right.
this is specifically exempt.
Hey, Werner, I haven't thought about or looked at the statute, the new state law, but wasn't the enhanced affordable housing somehow limited to growth areas? Wasn't there a density bonus you got if you were in a growth area? Am I
Yeah, there were portions of that. Let me pull it up. I'm just gonna take a look in the interim guidance language. So yeah, so one of the sections of that, and here we'll do a screen share here. Yeah, so this, you know, so this piece is something that would have to be adopted within ordinance, okay? But yes, I think, Paul, to answer your question here, it's this, to qualify this automatic density bonus, it's, within, it's within a growth area, for that density bonus, in an area where you have, multifamilies that are permitted, so you have a couple of different things that have to happen, in order for that to, occur.
Okay.
And so this is another one of those pieces where, and you've heard me talk about rulemaking, about the importance of having rulemaking done. It's important to understand, even for this, for purposes of this, in order us to try to understand what it, is going to look like. How do they define a multifamily dwelling? So our ordinance, might define it as, we define it as a multiplex, right? So that's going to be a 3 or more, Others may define multifamily as just 2, as a duplex. And so that's, depending on how that's defined, you're going to have, very different scenarios,
So my follow-up question, and I know for the purpose of the growth permits, we don't distinguish where that happens in town. It can be anywhere, right? We can exempt from a growth permit an affordable housing unit no matter where it is in town.
Well, provided that it's
Yeah.
consistent with the ordinance, yes.
Right, no,
Right.
Right.
whereas this density bonus is available only to folks in the growth areas.
That's right.
So,
Right.
so the potential in the other areas is not going to
No.
cause a problem with the numbers, likely. It would only be in the growth area where all of a sudden we would see a spike. We could see a spike.
That's right. So if you had, so if you would you'd have to look at a couple of different overlaps, so, I'll go back to, I got too many buttons going on here. Yeah, so as I'm looking at this, it's so for purposes of building, so we're looking at an area that's within a growth area, that's in an area in which multifamily dwellings are allowed, and then you have your, your shoreland zoning, pieces.
Okay.
And so, you've got a couple different layers that have to be applied, so growth area being one of them. And then you further take the zoning map and look at, which underlying zones allow for multifamily. And that's where this definition of, is it, is a 2-family a multi, or is a 3-family, or a 3 plus a multi?
Yeah.
Because if a 2, is a multi under this definition, then, then that's essentially going to be all of your growth area. For all practical purposes, because we have duplexes essentially in all areas of town as a permitted use, if that's how they define multifamily. If it's a 3 or more, then at that point we're looking primarily at village residential, for example, where you have multiplexes as as a conditional use. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so from what I have heard, it sounds like we're going to be seeing interim, some draft rulemaking that's gonna come about sometime this week. So we're waiting to see what that looks like. And then I believe that there is, opportunity for, for public comment, of that language, Now, I don't know what the details specifically of that public comment are gonna be, if that's something that you have to go, that you have to go to Augusta to do, or, or if they're gonna hold a hearing, like on Zoom or how, but, if folks are interested, once I get those details, I can pass that along, so.
Bullet points, I'd be interested in getting that.
Okay.
If there's a way to just kind of generalize what rules they are, I'd be interested in getting that.
Yeah, so what we'll do, once we get the interim, or the draft rulemaking, then I can pass that along.
Thanks.
And
Thank you.
then from there, folks can decide if they want to provide comment to the, to the state.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
so yeah.
So, we need to make any official statement on the numbers here is our assessment that the
No, I
growth
think,
permit program? Okay.
yeah, I think for purposes of ordinance, our agenda shows that, that was a topic that we, that we reviewed it, and our minutes will confirm that we did.
Okay. Were there any changes in?
I think we should,
s-
shouldn't we, I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if there was any changes within the infrastructure that would trigger a reevaluation of our growth area.
No, that's a good question. No, the town does not, doesn't have any, there aren't any specific plans to extend public sewer, that I'm aware of. So,
Okay.
right now, we're, as you all know, March is budget month. So, if you're looking for excitement, you can turn in every Thursday, to listen to the budget discussions. And so I think what you'll likely hear on that infrastructure side of things, you'll hear from Public Works about, improvements that are being made to our sewer department, wastewater facilities there. I can tell you a lot of what it is that, we have aging infrastructure, so we have a lot of, and it's primarily right now, I would say the big focuses are on the pump stations that we have. Those have they have a life, they have a lifespan, that some of them are past due, in terms of replacements. So, I think that's what you'll see and hear. So, but I'm not aware of any, there's no plans to,
Okay.
Extend public sewer into any particular areas.
And there hasn't been any from developers in the last 2 years that would change
No, we
the
have,
dynamics.
the subdivision, proposals that we're currently reviewing are, are all, private, septic and well, developments. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Paul.
Paul have a?
Yeah, I think, Paul, you were gonna maybe suggest, some type of language for us.
Oh, I thought maybe we should just, following the review, that we voted to keep the numbers the same for the time being. Not make any change. Or if this,
I would
or if the ordinance just says we have to review it.
Right.
then-
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
I think what I'm hearing is that there's, a recommendation to not make any recommendation for any changes.
Yeah.
We're maintaining
Right.
the course.
Right.
It's fine.
Right.
Yeah, I would second that. Any discussion on that? So I would put that in the form of a motion that Paul made, that we not make any changes based on our review. I second it. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, I think we have a good process at the moment. And it allows for growth if we see growth, right? 110% of our average last 10 years, so that will increase over time if there are.
Yeah, only if we ever get up over the,
Right, well,
only if we run only if we run 40 for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
but yeah, at this point, but it's, it appears to be, manageable for, the resources that we have at this time,
right. Gives us the opportunity to plan.
so.
Thank you. Nice presentation. I appreciate the charts and graphs, tables.
Yep, and if folks want an electronic copy of that, we can make that available as well.
Yeah, please do. Please send that.
Yeah, I can do that.
This is framed.
Hey, we're-
All right, that's, that's all that we have for you all this evening.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Paul said, was Paul gonna mention? I thought I heard him again.
Any other
I was-
business?
I was just looking at the Southern Maine website on the guidance. Is that new, or that was what they published like a few months ago?
Is that are you looking at the green document?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the same one.
Okay. Anyway, everybody should take a look at it. It's under, if you go to Southern Maine's website, it gives the guidance, but it, essentially tells us what Werner has told us, that we're waiting for the rulemaking.
Yeah.
But it does lay it out nicely.
Yeah, yeah, and I know once that's, once the rulemaking is available, that will also show up on SMPDC's site as well.
Any other business?
I don't have anything else at this point. Do you want to talk maybe a little bit about climate action planning and what's going on there? Give us a little discussion. So, I can give you all a little bit of background and, jump in if you want to with some of the details, but so the town is part of a cohort of communities, that through Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission is doing some climate action planning. It's oh gosh, what do we call ourselves again?
Climate Action Planning Task Force.
Yes.
Part of the Regional Climate Action Planning
Oh my
cohort.
Yeah. So there's been, there's a separate, task force that's set up, of members of the community. So other communities that are participating in this include Kittery, Kennebunk, Biddeford, and Kennebunkport are ones that are represented, in this project. And so we're doing this, like I said, in conjunction with our regional sustainability coordinator, that's Corinna Grader and Abby Sherwin out of SMPDC. And I think probably the best update is that there'll likely be some public engagement opportunities coming up in the future. We did have one that was scheduled for Wednesday, that however unfortunately had to be canceled due to a change in one of the consultants that SMPDC had hired to do the public engagement piece. So once we have some new folks on board to assist with the public engagement, we'll be updating folks on when those public meetings will be happening. So, but the cohort, has been, they've been working on, just some of the guidance, language and talking about strategies. And so, as we have more, that'll show up on the town's website and the town's social media. We'll post that.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other business? Other members? Hearing none. Paul?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn at 6:50.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey, thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Okay,
you.
good night.
Thanks.
Take care.
Take care now. Bye-bye.